I am 64 years old and I have had 2 near-death experiences, which I thought many people would have as a child, but not so, and I feel very fortunate that these experiences have given me clarity about my purpose in life, starting with my first experience, when I was only 4 years old, and even today, I can remember every detail very clearly. I was in the attic with my mother, and she was looking for some clothes that she had put up there. Suddenly I appeared in a big tree in the front yard, right next to the walk, and watched my mother run out of the house, very frightened, as she walked towards the next-door neighbor's house. Then I saw her with me in her arms. My mother later told me that I fell down the attic steps, and for many years I never told anyone about my experience. One thing that puzzled me about this fall was the tree. We didn't have a tree in our front yard. I remember later, when my father wanted to plant a tree, he asked us the best place to plant it. I answered immediately and was very adamant that the tree be planted next to the walking path. As the years went by, I often looked at the tree and thought to myself that it should have been bigger before. I grew to believe that this experience opened the door to God for me and allowed me to have some amazing experiences. I thought these were common to all individuals, but until recently I did not realize that what I have experienced throughout my life has been a very special blessing. The second experience was when I was 52 years old and I was preparing to dig a fish pond in my neighborhood. It was an afternoon and I was moving dirt with a mini excavator when I heard a voice warning me, "Jump in." I've been driving excavators for many years and I never thought about jumping off the excavator, especially when it was moving, but I jumped anyway. I fell face first to the ground. I didn't think I was hurt and was ready to get up and check the excavator for damage. That's when I realized I couldn't stand up and I was pinned down by the excavator's fall protection frame. Then I realized I was having trouble breathing and I knew I was going to die. I told God I didn't want to curl up under the backhoe and die. I wanted to lie in my wife's arms with my children and grandchildren surrounding me. I started to yell for help, but no one heard me. I saw the front yard of my house. There were all kinds of flowers in the yard. Very beautiful, and I thought to myself that God was showing me not to give up and that I would be safe back at home. I had to calm myself down and try to adjust my breathing. It was getting harder to breathe. I pleaded with God not to let me die, but I knew I couldn't hold on much longer. I asked God to forgive me for all my sins. I said goodbye to my family. I told them that I loved them and that I had no more strength left. I finally put my head down and slowly closed my eyes, knowing that this was the end for me. That's when I heard a voice say, "Go and find the light." I saw a light in the distance. It was only a short distance away from me. But what I saw wasn't a tunnel, it was more like a particularly large ventilation tube that was spinning and angels were all around it. It looked like an upside-down tornado, with the big end at the bottom. I thought, this must be the entrance to heaven. I got to the opening of the pipe. As I entered the pipe, then I heard my wife's voice, calling me to go to dinner. Her voice was not quite the same as usual, and I couldn't tell what was different. It was as if all the angels were shouting with her. I felt I was being pulled out of the pipe and back under the roll cage, and I felt the excavator pressing against my back, which was killing me. I yelled for help, but I don't think my wife heard me. I was desperate and prayed hard for God to help me. What a comfort it was when I heard my wife's voice. She heard my cries for help and came running. She tried to move the backhoe, she couldn't move it. She went home and called for help. After a while, I heard the sirens in the distance and knew they would be here soon. Watching the ambulance drive up to the back of the house, I was so happy that my wife told them to hurry up. Every second counts. They called a lot of people before they moved the backhoe and moved me out. They cut my clothes off and I heard one of them say, "My God, look at his spine." I was carried to the ambulance. Throughout the whole process, there was a pair of hands that kept lifting my back, and those hands never moved. I was thinking that these hands could be the hands of an angel. When I got to the hospital, they were ready to do the surgery and I kept asking them to give me something to help me breathe. I was still having trouble breathing. They told me that I had to wait for the test results to come back first, and when they did, everyone stared at me. I didn't have a lot of physical damage. There was only muscle damage, and they kept me in the hospital for a while for observation. The doctor allowed my wife to stay in the room with me, and she told me that all my family members were here. It was very comforting to know that so many people had come to see me, but at the same time I was sad that I couldn't see them. The hospital only allowed 2 visitors and it meant a lot to me to have my family in the waiting room praying for me. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, the doctor came in to examine me and the doctor turned to me on the way out and said, "You're a lucky guy." It didn't take long for me to go home, and I don't think I have any fear of death from my experiences as a child. As a note here, I had been a part-time hospital chaplain for 5 years before this accident, and not long after I returned home, I received a phone call in the middle of the night and was asked to come to the hospital to be with a patient who was about to die. I went to the hospital and spent time with that patient. I asked her how I could help her and she said, "Tell me what it's like to die." I told her that I could tell her my experience and after hearing it she said that my story helped her a lot. She passed away that night. Since that night, I have been using my near-death experience to help those who need help. I also use it to help patients who are worried about death. I often use it with families who have lost a loved one unexpectedly. I have gotten very positive feedback from the families. One day, my granddaughter wanted me to show her my former house while she was riding in the car. I took her to the side of the house and found the tree as big as I remembered it from my first near-death experience.